morning. Welcome, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Just City Making Policy Lab, the Just and Productive one, which is the last and final policy lab in the Art of Just City Making series, which has been organized by the French Presidency of the Council of the EU and the French National Agency for Territorial Cohesion, the NCT, alongside the UK Active. My name is Adela Heinkes, and today I will be co-moderating this event alongside Kadesh Matsumoto, who is the head of sustainable urban development at the EU. For those of you who do not know us, maybe the UKN is a network of national governments that work together on urban matters and promoting sustainable urban development. So we support knowledge sharing and producing by organizing and hosting policy labs, but also supporting European countries during their EU presidencies, just like we are doing right now. To introduce the policy lab and to kind of put it in a context and refer back to our two previous policy labs, I would like to invite Nikita, who is the Deputy Director of the City and Urban Cohesion, the General Commission of Territorial Equality, so the INCT in France. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much, Livia. Dear all, on behalf of the French Presidency of the EU, I welcome you to this last policy lab dedicated to the just and productive city. It comes from the series that has started in April, namely Art of Just City Making, organized with the EUKN and specifically today in cooperation with OECD. The previous presidencies with Germany, Portugal, Slovenia have defined strategic framework documents to keep the momentum of the urban development and make evolved the national urban policies regarding the current challenges. To pursue and go further, the French presidency has decided to focus on the three dimensions of the new Leipzig Charter, endorsed by the European ministers in charge of urban matters during the German presidency in November 2020. Based on the principle "no one left behind," we aim to explore on how to implement the new Leipzig Charter, specifically the just dimension. Broadly speaking, in France, we share and promote the principles of governance described in the new Leipzig Charter, such as the integrated approach, the co-design of policies, the citizen participation, the multi-level governance, and the capacity building of cities. In particular, we chose this subject because we believe that at the European level, we can deepen the social dimension of the urban agenda for the EU, and the dimension of just cities is a way to mitigate inequalities within cities and between areas. Since 40 years now, in France, we have developed a long-lasting policy, so-called Politique de la Ville, for the 1,500 most vulnerable and poorest neighborhoods. This policy has the following objectives. First, to tackle poverty, then to promote employment, and to improve living conditions. Those deprived areas faced with social economical difficulties are targeted by multi-partnership approach and indeed multi-level approach within a city contract. To support this integrated way to develop social and urban dimensions, those city contracts have three main pillars: social cohesion, living conditions and urban renewal, employment and economic development. One of the main characteristics is the involvement of citizens in the implementation of this policy by Citizens' Council. You could refer to the previous Policy Lab on Just and Green City, organized on the 20th of April for further details on this national urban policy, and you will find the link in the chat. Beyond Politique de la Ville, France implements several policies for revitalization of city center. France has developed also dedicated programs for small and medium-sized cities for a sustainable urban development. Now, the concept of productive city that we are going to talk about today, this concept of productive city is emerging and growing in urban planning. The pandemic crisis questions authorities to take better into account the economic activities, the need for enterprises, workers, and the place of work in cities. The work is evolving those last decades, and the COVID has accelerated those changes. A more inclusive, open, climate-friendly, green model of cities seems possible. I am looking forward to hear the experts and the testimony of Marseille on how it is realistic for the common good of inhabitants. We expect from those policy labs to explore and deepen how to better embed the social and just issues and the inclusion of digital dimension within public action at different levels. We thank EUKN and the speakers for being part of this process that will be detailed later. And we are also happy that OECD is co-organizing this policy lab, as OECD has a wide and from-the-ground experience regarding an inclusive way to use digital tools. I wish you frank, fruitful discussions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ahik. Thank you for this introduction and for putting the Policy Lab in a context. As Ahik also mentioned, all of the dimensions of the new Leipzig Charter refer to each other. And by organizing the 3 policy labs, we really wanted to show the interconnectedness of the 3 dimensions, but also an integrated approach to city making. So the productive dimension is an interesting one, especially nowadays with the recovery from a pandemic, with the idea of production being kind of growth and development and economic growth. The new Leipzig Charter really tries to redefine that productivity, especially in the context of cities, to ensure a favorable, innovative environment and opportunities for local and regional production. So it really stresses and emphasizes a mixed economy, mixed spaces, and reintegrating production into the urban area while ensuring an accessible and inclusive urban fabric. One of the objectives of this policy lab is actually to draft recommendations for policy makers on all levels. So to foster a just city making on the different dimensions, which we talk about, in this case, the just productive one. It will be presented at the end of the French presidency and given as a list of recommendations for policy makers. So this policy lab is actually a platform for the panelists, the speakers, and experts to discuss based on their knowledge how a just productive city can come into life, but also to involve our audience and to hear from you what you think the best approaches are and how you imagine a just productive city. Now, I would like to hand over to Tadashi to welcome you on behalf of the OECD and introduce himself a little bit.
Thank you, Adela. Welcome all on behalf of the OECD. Thank you, French presidency of the Council of the European Union, for taking the lead of this important initiative. So this is the final policy lab, as Adela said, within the Art of Just City Making series, focusing on the productive aspect of just city making. My name is Tadashi Matsumoto. It's my pleasure to moderate this policy lab. As defined by the new Leipzig Charter, the productive city can be characterized above all by a diversified economy, which provides jobs while ensuring a sound financial base for sustainable urban development. Many international urban agendas, guidelines, recommendations such as the Agenda 2030 and the OECD principles on urban policy underline that future cities should be simultaneously productive and just. But evidence on OECD countries shows that not all cities have managed to grow and reduce inequality at the same time, creating disparities. Disparities have been even more visible during the COVID-19 pandemic, when a large part of the population started working remotely and keeping safe, while some who are on the front lines and low paid could not do that. We are observing disparities not only within cities, but also across cities. We are facing yet a new challenge due to the war in Ukraine. In the OECD data shows that consumer prices in the OECD area rose by 8.8% in March 2022. The energy price inflation in the OECD also has risen to 33.7% in March. These new challenges are really not able to be solved by any one levels of government. However, the role of cities are critical, vital to address these challenges. That's a question to be tackled in this policy lab. How can urban policies and city making ensure the balance between the productive and just dimensions? How to integrate new economies and production activities, such as manufacturing, reindustrialization, circular economy, into cities to enhance policy interactions, social interactions, and broaden diversity in skill sets and job opportunities. We are very much happy to welcome all the participants, distinguished experts and panelists for this important policy lab. Just to close to my welcome, I'd like to just introduce a bit of today's agenda. So after this introduction, to get to know better the audience, we will start with a few polls. Then our expert will give a short introduction to the subject. The expert is Amal Shebro, policy analyst in the Social Economic and Innovation Unit at the OECD. Then we continue to the panel discussion. We are here together with three distinguished panelists. First, Tilman Buchholz, German Ministry of Housing, Urban Development and Building, head of the Urban Development Policy Unit. We have Karel van der Pulten, Policy Officer, Social Economy, DG GROW, European Commission. And Vincent Fouchet, Deputy Managing Director in charge of the Metropolitan Project and the Development Council, Aix-Marseille Provence Metropolis. Welcome to the session. Thank you very much for your time participating in this policy lab. So I'll stop here. Over to Adela.
Tadashi, for this introduction and for putting the policy lab actually in a very current and important context of what's happening in Europe nowadays. So to get to know our audience a little bit better, we'd like to share a poll with you and see where you come from or what field or what background you come from. So you can write the Mentimeter code on your telephone or use the QR code, scan it to answer a very short question. We'll give you a couple of minutes and share the answers with you on the screen. Okay, looks like the majority is on an EU level for now. We have a lot of the national level as well. Local, international, academia, a minority too. I see no one on the regional level. And no others either. But yeah, as we can see, EU and national stayed very stably as the highest ones. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for answering the question. It's always interesting to see who is joining the Policy Lab and kind of based on that, lead the discussion as well. I will now hand over to Tadashi with a second poll question, more theme-based now.
Sure. So second poll is a word cloud question. Imagine an ideal, just productive city. What's the first feature that comes to your mind? So this is a question. Please type in your thought. Seeing inclusive, of course, innovative, diversity, territorial, sustainable. Yes. We wait a little bit more minutes, seconds. Great. I think most of you have put your views on it. We'll elaborate, of course, these concepts even more in the session. So thank you very much for your participation. Now, I would like to introduce my colleague, Amal Chevreau. Again, welcome to this session. She will be introducing the social economy as a concept and its importance in relation to policy making, economic diversification, linking with green, circular, different patterns of production, social economy as a place-based concept, and also new understanding of productivity in the context of social economy. Thank you very much for your time again. Floor is yours, Amal.
Thank you, Tadashi, and I need to apologize right from the start from the quality of my internet connection. I'm really sorry. I can't do much about it. Sometimes it cuts, so I'll try to do my best, and hopefully, God willing, everybody will hear me correctly throughout the presentation. So, first of all, I'm really delighted to be with you this morning, and very happy to introduce a topic that's very much linked. The word justice and productivity is extremely innovative in my view, and I'm extremely happy to speak about a topic, a field that's the social economy, which is gaining a lot of traction these days. That could combine both the just productivity, if I may. So, and of course, there are many of my fellow the fellow discussants and panelists are people I know, and some of them also work in the field of the social economy. So let me begin by saying that you organizations or also have benefited from services from social economy organizations, being either cooperatives or social enterprises, but maybe because you don't know necessarily that it's a social economy organization, you might consider that this is just community work. But I wanted to bring closer to you the what the social economy entails and how it is viewed and seen in many OECD countries and beyond. So the social economy, as I said, has increasingly been in the spotlight use different terms, different concepts. The social economy is comprised of a set of organizations such as associations, cooperatives, foundations, mutual societies, and also social enterprises, which have recently, very recently, compared to the other set of organizations, emerged as key players of the social economy in many countries. And we've just released actually a manual on legislating on social economy, on social enterprises, sorry, just last at the end of April. So just to give you a in its own right, based on many estimates, social economy represents between 2 to 10% contribution to GDP in many OECD countries. In some countries, such as France, for instance, it's almost 10% of employment, with more than 2.3 million social economy organizations. In the EU at large, it is estimated also that there are at least 2.8 million social economy organizations that employ almost 6% of EU employees. So it is something very big, and it's getting magnitude and getting traction. And this diversity, some of them are linked to the development sometimes of the welfare state. In some countries where the welfare state is very developed, social economy is not developed in the same way as in other countries. But generally, in almost all countries, there is at least one form or one type of organizations of social economy organizations that exist, and mostly cooperative. These are the ones that are mostly widespread and known almost in every country that we have studied so far. They organize their activities differently because they have some of them being democratic governance, so one man, one vote. A lot of concentration on principles of solidarity, focus on the principles of cooperation as well, and also specific rules to those organizations which produce, for instance, goods and services, which sells goods and services, specific rules to the distribution of profit, and the idea is injected in their activities to serve their social mission. So these are organizations that are very social impact driven, and they have specific rules which allow them to belong to this specific field that's called social economy. We have released a study during the COVID crisis, at the very beginning of the COVID crisis, that was really, really highly ranked in the publications. Turn off my video. I'm told to turn off my video. Okay, I will turn off my video. Work either. Yeah, it is due to OECD network because the system we're using here is different from the one. Voilà. So I just wanted to go on with what I wanted to say this morning. So the social economy, as I said, we have identified two functions to it when we studied how it helped with the COVID-19 pandemic. The first function of the social economy is what we call a repair function, which is to help respond quickly to crisis. Active where there is either state or market failures, they're very much used to being very active in repairing the mishaps of these of specific social or economic ills. The second function, which is a very interesting function, is the transform function, which is to start very innovative ways of either producing or consuming that become mainstream. And some of these practices that are now very well known and very mainstream are fair trade, for instance, or even organic local food. A lot of these organizations, even before in some countries, a lot of governments and local governments basically have identified a specific role for social economy organizations in their recovery plans. And I would, of course, I've listened to the presentation by ANCT. At the beginning, I know that in France, a lot of local government, because of many reasons that I might explain if you wish in the discussion, have identified specific role in their recovery plans for social economy organizations, either to rejuvenate or revigorate specific areas in cities or even in rural areas, or for instance in Spain with the relaunch plan. There was a social corporate. Now, as I said, social economy organizations could be are very active and have been very active in making a lot of places either greener or fairer, but this is because of the DNA of their activity. So, in for instance, there are specific organizations, mostly in urban areas, for instance, where you have a specific type of social economy organizations which deal with people who have been unemployed on a very long, known as these specific organizations help get a lot of people back to work using or capitalizing on their abilities, for instance, to engage more in green activities or in patterns of more just productive ways, either in agriculture or industry or other sectors. And I have to say that we have released, and I can share that with you later on in the chat, we have released, for instance, a whole policy brief that was produced with the European Commission on the contribution of policy brief, you will now called circular, started with social economy organizations in many places. Last point I wanted to touch upon is the fact that social economy is also very place-based. Basically, social economy organizations operate at the local level. They are usually very locally rooted. And in many places, and we have also released work on 4 countries where we observed how social economy is has been very beneficial to regional and local development. That because of the many specific aspects of social economy, they can have a positive effect on either local or regional development. One of them being that social economy organizations inspire trust because they work with citizens. They try to engage a whole local chain of stakeholders such as citizens, consumers, policymakers, and so on. They have marginalized groups and they provide social services. They're actually very much specialized in many countries in providing social services to the ones who cannot get access to them. And for instance, I can give you an example. In Sweden, municipalities are very much encouraged to work with the social economy organizations, and more specifically with social enterprises, to find alternative solutions to ensure service provisions. So to come to a close, there are a lot of recommendations, and I'm happy, as I said, to share different contributions of social economy organization, city development. And I know that there are a lot of cities who have made social economy a part of their strategic priorities, such as Paris, Barcelona, Amsterdam, a lot of Belgium, Brussels. A lot of these places have and cities have are engaged pretty much in promoting and developing social economy organizations on their territory because of the many benefits that I've touched upon in my presentation. So I would say that maybe the first policy recommendation would be that social economy, the social economy is more of an approach than a field, than a sector as such. So it could be mainstreamed in many sectors, and it could contribute a lot, of course, um, economic development of cities and other places, of course. Diversification. Social economy organizations are present almost in every sector. So that could be another way to engage more with the social economy, which is to help these organizations, which are usually small and medium. Some of them are, of course, international, and maybe some of you have heard of Mondragon or diversify their activities. And I've just came back from a mission in Ireland, and I can tell you that they do a lot, for instance, for the development of many areas in the Dublin city and Dublin counties. So this is another way to support social economy development. Replicate or support the replication of local initiatives, and these are usually led by social economy organizations. So, for instance, in France, we have what we call le Réseau National des Ressourceries, and this is just to show that there is an interest in replicating such initiatives. I said initiatives that are not budget consuming a lot, but their impact, their social impact, their environmental impact is very high. And I would say the last policy recommendation would be to expand collaboration and increase the visibility of social economy organizations, because this is a win-win. If the more these organizations are engaged with activities with local government, the more there is an enhancement of local assets in many ways. And with as I said, be busy, because I can see now that the connection has been really bad, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll put in the chat all the links to the recent work that we have produced on social economy. I wanted even to last point I wanted to finish with is that the OECD is developing a specific legal instrument on the social and solidarity economy with a strong local angle, and we would like to engage more with cities on that front, because we know that this is one way to uh, achieve of your conference today, which is just. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amal. And I would like to just quickly apologize for the connection. It's also a Monday morning for the OECD internet, I can imagine. But nonetheless, it was a great introduction and a great introduction to the social economy concept, which is really interesting in the context of just productive city making, because it really focuses on integrating society and economy and making sure that there's a diverse, accessible, and inclusive way of bringing production and different mixed economy activities back into urban areas or outside of the urban areas and connecting the territories to cities. So it works on a local level and an urban level, and overall is a great introduction to the theme of productive city making in an accessible and just way. I'd like to hear more from our panelists and what they think a perfect, just productive city will be. So they will be answering the same question as the audience based on their experience and previous knowledge. First of all, I'd like to hand it over to Tilman Buchholz, who is the head of the Urban Development Policy Unit at the German Ministry of Housing.
Thank you so much, Adela. Thanks for promotion, by the way. I'm deputy head, not the head. But yeah, first, I would like to thank the French presidency for taking up the new Leipzig Charter in this series of policy labs. From our point of view, it's definitely a great idea to put the just dimension of the of the new Leipzig Charter onto the center stage of your presidency. And we are also very much looking forward to the overall conclusions of this series of policy labs that will come at the DG meeting in June. So what is our idea of the ideal productive city? I think it's relatively easy to answer that. I only need to refer to the New Leipzig Charter, as this is also our general guideline and what it's outlined there concerning the productive city. So a productive city, and that has been already mentioned today, is characterized by a diversified and powerful economy. It's a business and industry that provides decent jobs and serves also as a tax base for the city. And a productive city needs a skilled workforce and a favorable environment for economic activity, like all kinds of infrastructure. And the Leipzig Charter also comes with the idea to bring production back into the city in order to create mixed-use neighborhoods. And I think low-emission industry, services industry, cultural industries, all these give us the opportunity to bring production back into the city and to work in this direction of a city of short distances, or as it is often called, the 15-minute city. And this concept is also very much linked to the productive city. And what is also crucial is that dimensions like the productive, the green, the just city cannot be seen separately in silos, but have to be combined and balanced. So with regard to a productive and just city, for us, it's important that such a city provides equal opportunities for everyone, also with a view to jobs and to education and training. So these are the general ideas that lead also our national urban policy, even more in the aftermath of the COVID crisis, and the aim to build up cities which are more resilient. This is also definitely a focus of our national urban policy in Germany. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tilman, and thank you for introducing the New Leipzig Charter as well, how it refers to the just and productive city making, as you're one of the people who also worked on this document and on drafting this document and producing this document. So you are a specialist in that sense. I will now hand it over to Carol van der Poorten to answer the same question. So what is a perfect just productive city for you?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and also thank you very much to the French presidency for hosting this very interesting policy lab. I'm happy that Amal already gave a quite fair introduction on the role of social economy in the just productive city dimension, and to make several links to what social economy can contribute. I will pick in on certain elements that link social economy as a, let's say, a resource for the territory, as we often proclaim in our speeches and our approaches. That is something that is not always so straightforward explained. As Amal explained, social economy has this repair function in the first place, which I definitely agree, but it should definitely not be the only, let's say, appreciation of social economy. Because definitely this innovative approach, this social innovation capacity that many social economy stakeholders have to make new business models, but also new societal connections, new type of partnerships along different other partners outside the social economy. And I think that is the ultimate richness for the local aspect, because social economy, first of all, has this local anchorage. We try always to give a European added value on social economy by interlinking, and this is also of course very much embedded in the philosophy of social economy actors and enterprises, to share, to exchange, to build, let's say, mutual connections across border. But in the end, the foundations, the roots of social economy actors are always very much connected and rooted into the territory. That has several advantages, but also some disadvantages. One of the advantages that we see today, for example, in discussions that we have since the COVID-19 crisis, and there actually it started, to revalorize the local presence of economic actors, and to revalorize also local not only services, because these are mostly attached to the local reality, but also again production activities. For example, today with the Ukrainian crisis on top of this, but actually this started already before COVID-19, but it accelerated a lot, and Amal also referred to it, is, for example, in the agro-food sector, where social economy actors are very strongly represented. This new local short chain value connection that are made with local production and consumption patterns that are connected to each other, where social economy, for example, agriculture cooperatives, but also other type of social economy actors are very strong in boosting this. Now, first of all, in COVID-19, it was something that was valorized because people had, let's say, more interest to that. But now it might turn into a more necessity, because we see that certain global value chains are not delivering anymore what we were used for such a long time. So therefore, it's really crucial that we also make sure that social economy takes part in this productivity aspect, but in a, let's say, societal responsible manner, and on the other hand also this ecological responsible manner. And this agriculture, these agri-foods, is just one particular aspect, because we can also link bridges then, as Amal also said. Social economy is not a single sector, it's very much across a horizontal phenomena, where you, for example, might link to the housing sector as well today. And again, COVID-19 made it very prominently present, this challenge of affordable housing, but actually this was already a long time present in our societies, and definitely in cities. Still this morning there was an article in Politico about the city of Milan, for example, that is becoming under serious pressure for affordable housing capacity. And this is not the only, it's basically an issue in every big city and metropole around Europe. And their social economy provides very clear answers on how to overcome that, for example, with cooperative housing initiatives, with community land trust initiatives, but also the traditional social housing is a very important pillar of the social economy action. or let's say the social economy landscape, where certain housing capacities are provided for people in need and who have limited resources. All these elements are rooted and based upon a very, let's say, specific business model. It's a variety of business model, but they have common characteristics. First of all, it's a limited profit or non-profit, let's say, aim. But secondly, and that is even more important, is this collaborative approach that is behind. Amal already explained indeed, and other contributors as well, this cooperative or democratic participatory model, but also other more, let's say, community engagement models where you go way beyond a single shareholder dependence, for example. And then a third aspect which I would like to contribute is also this innovative approach where I started my intervention with, which really is always trying to find new approaches, new solutions for these societal questions in housing, in agriculture, but also the circular value chains where companies are attached to each other at a local level. Again, their social economy with the collaborative economy, for example, became a main driver to make business models really serving local prosperity and not using the local, let's say, production as a source to extract to the local reality. I think that is a very important message I could bring, and that is something we wish to advocate way more with the Social Economy Action Plan that was published by the European Commission last winter in December, as well as the industrial strategy that was presented 1 year before by the European Commission, where also social economy and proximity economy, which is very prominent today for the discussion we have on just productive cities, where those are brought together and put forward as a standalone industrial ecosystem next to 13 other industrial ecosystems, such as retail, such as energy intensive industries, etc., etc., etc. I think this is a very important message from the Commission that we wish to support those alternative business models for a just productive transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carol. You have mentioned so many important key terms and elements which will be further developed in the second round and answering what we already have and what we need for a just productive city. For now, I would like to hand the floor over to Vincent Fouchier, who's the Deputy Director General of the Aix-Marseille-Provence Metropolis and was the former chair of the OECD Working Party on Urban Policy. What is a perfect just productive city for you, Vincent?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. It's a great pleasure being with you today and to share some reflections together. First of all, the definition of the productive city or the productive economy as defined by our National Institution of Statistics, it's opposed to the presential economy. It means industry, energy, transport of goods, wholesale trade, and part of the construction activity. But I would define it as a production of good and wealth with an added value in the society, in the economy, and also in the environment. That's a new framework I think we can share together. And looking from that, we can observe that our tools have to be redeveloped. For instance, for a very long time, we very much focused on the sole prism of GDP, GDP per job, GDP per inhabitant, and with the colleagues from the OECD, with the member states, we're much more focused the last years on other ways to look at productivity, and to introduce the Sustainable Development Goals, the well-being indices, the human development indicators, and so on, as a new framework of looking at the productivity. And that has to be deal with the territorial aspect. And I will focus on 4 points. I don't want to say again, which has been already very well said before me. First thing is, an important matter is the scale of analysis. It is not a city but a territory that must be considered, and we need to take into account the interactions between the city and the surrounding areas and the more rural and less developed areas, as long as they participate to the same socio-economic system. If we don't do so, we don't understand what is just and what is productive if we don't look at the functional urban area as defined by the EU and the OECD together. And in my case, in Aix-Marseille-Provence, it's a crucial point. We have 92 municipalities, more than 3,000 square kilometers. And of course, such a scale of analysis is something we have to do. It's a way of reflection and action much more suited to the productivity matters. And as long as you have a port and logistics activities, you need to have this large-scale analysis, and not only the city scale as an analysis. The second point is that, of course, it has been said, the ideal, just and productive city is also green if we want to respect the Leipzig Charter. I won't go further on this, it has been already said. The first thing is that we need, if we want to have just and productive territory, we need to reduce the dependence on the outside, whatever the scale, basically, not to go to the autonomy, but to reduce the dependence in terms of goods, in terms of everything, energy, and so on. And the war in Ukraine just revealed this goal, but it was there before, of course. And in our case, in Aix-Marseille-Provence, 95% of what we consume is produced outside. We see there where is the challenge. There are some indices like the Fab City Index that can help to measure the self-production of a territory. I don't give details, but we can come back on that later if you want. And the last point I wanted to share with you is the large variety of productive activities. It's not the heavy industries as before. We introduce in the industry of the future, research, innovation, digital production, and so on. But also all the circular economy and recycling economy activities. And in that field, short circuits in circular production, repair, reuse, recovery, recycling, and more. They can be a very interesting source of sustainable growth for the productive activities. But as we see, productive activities, ideal or not, are always changing because we need to change what we produce, for who, and with what kind of effects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vincent. It's very interesting and important to rethink productivity and not think about it just in terms of GDP. And I think this policy lab would also help everyone listening to have a shift and a reimagination of the concept. Interesting also that you mentioned a territory as opposed to just a city. The final policy lab in terms of the French EU presidency will actually be hosted next week. It won't be in the Just City Making series, but it will actually be about the connection of urban territorial and reweaving the urban territorial factors and fabrics. It will be held on the 23rd May at 2 p.m. My colleagues are now pasting the link to it in the chat if you would like to know more and register for it. I will now hand over the floor to Tadashi, who will introduce the second round of questions and the second round of themes to speak more about current measures to make cities more just and productive and what we can still work on and how we can still improve.
Thank you, Adela. Before going into the second round, Vincent, thank you very much for reminding your excellent work at the OECD. You have been chair for more than 10 years. Last week, we had our latest working party meeting on Monday. Tilman was participating as a German delegate, and then we precisely discussed the issue of the uncertainty, the impact of the war in Ukraine, and then how do we react, and then how to prepare for the uncertainty. and just productive city is one of the very important items to consider. So this discussion is really a continuation of our discussion across OECD countries and of course the European context. So the question that we have prepared for all the panelists is to please provide concrete examples of what is already happening in this direction to advance just and productive cities, projects, initiatives, and your experience. Please share with us. Also, another question is please identify gaps and also provide one or two concrete recommendations for EU or national, regional or local policymakers on how to move forward. So with that, I'll pass the floor to Tilman again. And the floor is yours, Tilman.
Yeah, what do we have and what do we need? I will bring some concrete examples on what we do in Germany. But I think first I have to underline, and I'm sitting here together with many economists, I think, that when it comes to economic development, we as urban developer are perhaps not the very first address. We are not in charge of support schemes for economic development, for the business sector. We are not responsible for taxes, social security issues, labor market, minimum wages, and all these factors. But still, we are convinced that, and we all know, I think, that urban development has a role to play regarding productive and just cities in the sense of the New Leipzig Charter. And this, I think, is exactly what we do as part of our national urban policy in Germany, and especially in our urban development assistance programs. These programs are major national instruments with a budget of around 800 million euro per year, which is inter alia dedicated to economic revitalization of deprived neighborhoods. And especially the program Social City, the new term now is social cohesion, is well known for its integrated place-based, and here it comes to territory again, so place-based approach to upgrade physical infrastructure in especially deprived neighborhoods, and with a strong anchor also in participation and co-creation, and a lot of successful work beyond administrative silos and disciplinary boundaries. And I think there are a lot of similarities to the French approach on this politique de la ville that Eric mentioned in the very beginning of this series here. For instance, we have interministerial strategy, Social City, where we try to bundle resources of other ministries in the areas of our Social City program and try to target other initiatives and programs to the places where the resources are most needed. For example, the Ministry for Family Affairs has established youth migration services, what is called, in these areas to improve conditions for integration of young migrants into society and especially into the labor market. And another example I would like to mention here is the Esf program BIVAC. BIVAC is a German abbreviation, and it's the English translation would be Education, Business, and Work in the Neighborhood. And it is funded by the European Social Fund. The objective is to support people concerning the integration into the labor market, and also to support the local economy, especially in deprived neighborhoods. So it's a partner program of our Social City program, and it combines national and European funding sources. And in these specific neighborhoods, it links local low threshold educational, economic and labor market projects with the physical urban planning measures. And this link of this BWAC program with the Social City program is mandatory, which means that BWAC is also place-based and needs to be part of the local integrated urban development strategy. And the program has already a relatively long track record. It was launched already in the funding period 2007 to 2013 for the first time, and it will be also continued in the next programming period under this ESF Plus title, which will start very soon. And the last funding period, it had a volume of a little bit less than 200 million euros. And in the next funding period, it will be 211 million euros. And in previous periods, we had projects in around about 200 social city areas across Germany with 65,000 participants in the training courses. And the idea is to help long-term unemployed people to integrate into the labor market with qualifications on digital skills or in the field of environmental protection, preparing for jobs in maintenance of public parks and green spaces, but also urban food, agri-food, which was mentioned previously, also care for elderly people is another sector. So all this supports also this idea of the common good. And there I also see a clear link to the concept of the social economy that was introduced by Amal in the beginning. What do we need? What perhaps the gaps for the next funding period? What will be more important in the future is a focus on handicraft, on the construction sector, where we have a large lack of workforce indeed. And what is also what will be new is a closer cooperation with the local employment agencies to provide the participants better opportunities in the primary labor market and to pool resources and match the local needs in the business sector. Next to this, let's say, qualification pillar of this BWAC program, the other pillar is the support of the local economy to strengthen the local economy in these neighborhoods. For instance, it's about consulting, startups, image campaigns in the neighborhood, creating networks among the local business in the area, or management of vacant stores, for instance. So these are all activities to combine the just and the productive dimension of the European cities. Well, what are my key recommendations? One is you have to pour resources into vulnerable neighborhoods, which are in special need for support programs. This is a place-based approach. We have to work on the basis of integrated urban development concepts that bring different stakeholders together, and not only the usual suspects, but also stakeholders that are perhaps a little bit normally far away from urban development, like the labor market agencies. And in general, it's to strengthen cooperation vertically and horizontally likewise. So thank you very much. And I give the floor back to Tadashi then.
Thank you, Tilman. Perfect. You pointed out a very important piece. of putting resource in the right place and also integrated approach and so on. I just turned to Carol and to have your thought. What do you have and what do we need to create? Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A very interesting contribution from the previous speaker, and you will notice that I have some links that are very much aligned or building further. First of all, I wish to share with you several initiatives that we have that are potentially of interest for the topic and that are actually preparing and supporting on the ground these transitions, definitely focusing on cities or the local level. And let me start maybe with the first one, which is the Intelligent Cities Challenge. It's a program that works already for more than 5 years, led by the European Commission in engagement with 100 cities. It's a network of public administrations that develops together with the European Commission certain capacity and investment programs along 5 axes. And the first one is citizens' participation and digitization of the public administration, or the e-government, which is, in our opinion, really like an important asset and an opportunity to make also the access to certain services, the visibility of support services more profound and also more, let's say, widely spread for citizens and consumers. The second one is the green economy and local green deals, because we are very much convinced that the European, let's say, Green Deal ambition and the Fit for 55 package can only be obtained if similar deals are made at the local level. And that is pretty crucial argument here, because we see cities and local public authorities really as vectors of cooperation to deliver on green deals. And that might be in terms of renovation, that might be in terms of local circular value chains and practices. In waste management, water management, electricity, local electricity production, and so on and so forth. So there we give concrete advice, concrete support, capacity building, and we especially exchange between best practices, because some of our cities are really like very prominent in many of those aspects. Another aspect which is very, very crucial, and that is of course with the skills strategy of the Commission expressed very explicit, is upskilling and reskilling. Especially in areas where young people are going away or not interested to stay because there are no economic opportunities. Is upskilling and reskilling is really important, that we revalue also the local educational platforms, the local education access, and to make sure that people are still skilled even in remote and rural areas. And also more mainstream skilled and not in a single sector, for example, to make them also, let's say, appreciative for new labor market opportunities, to new innovations that might arrive, brought by, for example, the green and digital transition. One specific aspect we also want to touch there is the green and digital transition in tourism, because we see that the local territory is particularly interesting to develop new sectors, service more related sectors in tourism, and that's where we want to specifically focus. And the fifth one are supply chains, logistics, and the economics of mobility, so how to organize these at the local level, again with the public authority as the main factor. So this is a very interesting program where we see incredibly interesting aspects featuring, for example, a tech for good marketplace, where technology for good is openly designed and shared between public authorities, also to facilitate more business activity, but also to have more, let's say, civil society actions, civic tech, as we also may call that, driven by civil society and citizens themselves. A second initiative I would like to share with you is the Affordable Housing Initiative, which started 2 years ago with a very straightforward ambition to renovate district level social housing facilities to really have this approach in an integrated manner, because now we had the renovation wave announced by the Commission 2 years ago. We have massive investments thanks to the recovery and resilience facility of the EU, but also at national and even regional and local level in renovation of housing. But there we need to have an extra effort for social housing, as we have in many cities. I highlighted in my introduction, really housing crisis is appearing where social housing facilities are not answering current standards in terms of energy efficiency. And for us, that is even a non-question, but also in terms of livability. And that is pretty crucial, that if we have this opportunity of investment in renovation, that we also need to make sure that these investments are done in focusing on well-being, on health, and on livability of those areas, and not just insulation in the wall and a good, let's say, efficient energy system. This is really something we wish to target with this initiative. Therefore, we focus on district level, and that might also be in rural and remote areas, so not only limited to cities. If you wish to have more information about those initiatives, I'm definitely definitely willing to share. A last small point I wish to highlight, and that also bridges to my recommendations, is a report that we have published on clusters of social and ecological innovation. This is basically the answer of the social economy to industrial competitive clusters, a phenomena that exists for many years and is supported a long time by the Commission, and where we want to have also the input from social economy actors who also engage in clusterization, as we call it, meaning bringing together different partners at a local level, aiming at a certain prosperity project in terms of business development. And so those partners are education and research on the one hand, the business community on the other hand, but also public and local authorities. What we see with social economy clusters is that there's a very strong civil society engagement in that. We wanted to map those phenomena around Europe. We have published a report, and we are now continuing this database and having specific support measures by the traditional cluster policy instruments. I will end with just my three recommendations very briefly. So first, building on this report on clusters, this is very interesting phenomena to build further on this quadruple helix cooperation models at the local level for the Green Deal, for skills, for local competitiveness, and a new approach on this productivity. Second one is really to have this focus on remote and rural areas where decentralized scaling models can really be an asset for the future, and to revalue also local economic activity, for example, with community-led development. I have heard similar cases from other speakers. I think we really need to bring investments back to the remote rural areas or suburban areas by participatory approaches. And then last but not least, use this renovation wave all across Europe as really a big opportunity to go the extra mile in terms of innovation support, social innovation support, but also this integrated approach to foster well-being and inclusive societies at the local level, and not just the energy renovation or energy efficiency goal, which is already stabilized given. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karel. Without any delay, I pass the floor to Vincent. Vincent, floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Tadashi. Well, what do we have? What do we need? I will point out 5 topics. The first is the new profile of productive activities. I will take our example in Aix-Marseille-Provence. In the last 40 years, since the 80s, we gained 20,000 jobs in the productive activities, which is now 32% of our total employment is in the productive activities. It's a very big part of our economy. But if you look at the Marseille scale, the city of Marseille, the city lost 36,000 productive jobs, minus 29% in the same time. So we have witnessed a very important and strong spatial redistribution, quite typical in the French cities, I have to say, but it's both a territorial transformation and the profile of the company's activities. So historically, in our case, productive activities had their hours of glory, and they contributed very much to the wealth of the territory. But they have changed considerably, and many have disappeared, others have appeared. But we have to look at the people who benefited from from these activities. Some of them are now in very great difficulty because of the lack of employment in their field if they are not skilled for the new activities. So we witness also productive activities, new life, reindustrialization. It's good to gain a better independence, but we need to take care of the justice. Justice must prevail in the expensive phases of industrial production, but also in the contraction phases. That's why some tools like fiscal tools or intermunicipal cooperation are crucial in order to make sure that in the long run everyone will gain. The second point is on the economic diversity. It's a strength for a metropolis like ours, compared with, for instance, Toulouse metropolis, which economy is much based on the aeronautic industry, but which is not much diversified. In our case, because we have a large panel of economic activities, productive or not productive, we can be much more resilient in front of the several kinds of crisis. So we need to have a very hybrid mix of economies. First point is that the labor-intensive activities with low environmental bad effects must be our goals. But sometimes it happens that job creations do not reduce the level of unemployment in cities for several reasons: the skills, but also the lack of public transport. When industries go far from the centers, when you have low income workers in the cities far from the industry, sometimes they cannot even go to take the job because they have to move. And if they don't have a car, they can't pay the car, they can't pay the energy for the car, and there is no public transport, then inequalities appear. So we have to be very much careful about that. The last, another point is the zero artificialization of the space. We need to stop to urbanize our agricultural land. So, and there is a law in France to impose that in the coming years. It will change radically our relationship between productive activities and space. It's another change. And telework induce now a new peri-urbanization, new inequalities between those who can telework and the others. And in the productive activities, you can't telework. So there is another line of inequalities which is appearing now. And finally, I will wrap up my key words for the recommendations. First is territorial scale. Second, diversified economy. Third, the less dependence on the outside and better use of local assets. The fourth is increased skills of the population in order to have a very intensive labor activities. And five, new ways to transform the urban fabric and get a better mix of functions within the city area, not expanding outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vincent, and to all of the speakers for sharing with us such inspirational but also thought-provoking practices that are already in place or should be in place to create more productive and just cities. All of them mentioned very, very important key terms and aspects, from social to public transport to local neighborhood level ones. We tried to summarize most of the recommendations mentioned by the speakers in 2 slides. So we will now share with you the recommendations that we drafted based on the speakers' interventions. The first one being increasing the impact of the social economy, as mentioned by several of our speakers, by mainstreaming its contribution as much as possible in different economic and social fields. That would be on all levels, so the national, the local, and the EU, European level. Second one is diversification. So the support for social economy organizations, which also addresses the issues such as energy poverty and helps energy poor households lower their energy costs through efficiency measures. The third one, also mentioned by Tillman, is pouring resources into vulnerable neighborhoods. So that would also connect to the urban territorial connections, not only focusing on the city centers, but also having a link to the other territories and focusing on the vulnerable neighborhoods. Then we have work on the basis of an integrated urban development. So as you could see and hear from all the speakers, all the issues are interconnected within cities, and the issues related to productive, just city making are also very much interconnected. So an integrated approach would allow for a holistic view and overview all of the issues, and then see how solutions can answer the issues. The fifth recommendation is joining the unsuspected stakeholders like labor market agencies at a local scale. So really having a connection between different actors, stakeholders, citizens from every level to be able to answer the issues and have a more just productivity within the cities. The sixth recommendation is intergovernmental and international collaboration. I think that you could really deduct from all of the speeches. So having more contact and communication on the local level, but also on the national and EU level. Next is coordinating the job supply and demand and providing education or reskilling whenever necessary to introduce new populations, new skills, and new economies into the cities, but also be able to mix them around and not having a homogeneous population within city centers. Next, we have increasing justice and access to employment by developing accessible public transport. As just mentioned by Vincent, it is a very important thing to have a connection to the city and within the city to be able to provide an equal opportunity for jobs to everyone. Finally, we have another one about the integrated approach. So taking an integrated approach to innovation, which needs to include social and economic as well as sustainable green elements and apply to urban and suburban areas alike. We have also prepared a poll for our participants, for our audience, because we are curious to know which one of those recommendations you find most important and you most connect to, or you think that it makes most sense on different levels, or think that it should really be taken into account and included in our policies nowadays. We will give you a few minutes, or a minute or two, to check out the recommendations on the slide and let us know which one you find most important. I see that we already have some answers, and diversification seems to really be in the lead. So supporting social economy organizations that address issues such as energy poverty. Then we have coordinating the job supply demand, which is also very important and connects accessibility and inclusiveness within city centers. The third one is pouring resources into vulnerable neighborhoods, so a focus on the lesser economically developed neighborhoods. It has now shifted to working on the basis of integrated urban development, and I see that number 2 has been taken over by taking an integrated approach. And now it's on the same level as increasing justice and access to employment in terms of public transport. Okay, very dynamic poll. I think most of the votes are in. So diversification, integration, and coordination seem like the key terms and the key focuses that should really be prominent in policy making for a just productive city. To quickly summarize, we are now preparing a joint recommendation document, which will also touch upon just green city making and just digital city making. So we really want to promote an integrated approach to just city making, therefore connecting the different dimensions of the new Leipzig Charter and the different dimensions mentioned by the speakers, but also speakers from the 2 previous policy labs. If you would like to check out the previous policy labs, you can find the links pasted in the chat. But from that, we can see that all of the recommendations and most of the points mentioned by the speakers are very much intertwined. And some of them might seem a little abstract at first and might not be prepared fully to be implemented or to work in terms of projects on local levels. So as a UKN, we are trying to make the recommendations pragmatic and support the French presidency in creating a document that is really usable and practical and creates an impact. The document will be presented on the 24th of June at the GG meeting and will be also published online. So if you are curious to see what we come up with and what recommendations you can take out of the Art of Just City Making Policy Lab series, you are very much invited to find them towards the end of next month. I would like to thank everyone who participated in this policy lab, but also in the 2 previous policy labs, and to everyone who facilitated the events. So the French EU Council presidency, the SAT, the UKN colleagues, of course, the OECD, URBACT, and ICLE Europe, who are all facilitating and participating in the 3 events. Thank you so much to our audience, who has been very active and participatory in the events and has really contributed their perspective as well. I will now hand over for a very short conclusion to Tadashi as well.
Thanks, Adela, for the summary. From my side, I'll pass a short intervention from the expert from OECD, Amal, and I will make a 1-minute conclusion. So Amal, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tadashi. Now, I just wanted to say that, of course, what we have seen also is that there is a trend today for social economy, and as you have, noticed it, there is a trend that social economy is now part of a lot of city planning to have a new ways of production. I think that what Vincent has said, what Karel has said, what we heard from Germany as well, converge in one point, which is that maybe the social economy could also help in making production in cities and city making in general as well a lot more, let's say, inclusive, a lot greener, because social economy organizations, as I said, pioneer a lot of practices that become mainstream. So I think we need to capitalize on this possibility. And last point also on social innovation, the European Union is helping a lot of countries to start what they call centers of excellence for social innovation. And I think maybe there is a lot to learn from examples in Portugal and other places in the EU and beyond on how to mainstream also social innovation in getting production a lot juster and fairer and inclusive. Thank you very much, Tadashi, and of course, happy to engage more on social economy in cities afterwards with participants. Thank you.
Thanks, Amal. You spent my 1 minute, so I try to really make it short. So the OECD Secretary General has put his 5 priorities. Among them, I'll highlight digital and climate twin transformation, which is very, very relevant to this topic of productive and just cities. So I like to highlight that. Second point, Karel well described this, but I also like to highlight the importance of housing policies in cities. Third point of rural-urban dimension, this was also pointed out many of the people. the OECD principles on urban policies and rural policies. Both two documents are focusing on the urban and rural integration as a key principle. So it's very important. Number 4, multi-level governance issue is very, very important. I think many of the EU programs are also pointing out, focusing on this, the connection between national funding, EU funding, but also the local implementation, neighborhood scale activities, and then also using a planning tool at the local level to integrate all the different endeavors at the local level. So this multi-level governance is very important. Finally, national urban policy. So OECD is also supporting national urban policy activities. The global monitoring work is ongoing, and very, very important from, of course, the implementation of the new Leipzig Charter. Every country is encouraged to renew or frame the national urban policy from the new perspective. So this is my take away from this interesting session. Thank you very much for, again, all the participants, all the panelists and the experts for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of the day, everyone.